Hello, and welcome to Offensive Azure Security session. My name is Sergey, and I will be presenter for the next 45 around that minutes. This session will be taken in English, so I hope you are pretty well with that. But because I'm not going to talk a lot, this session will be based on live demos, so even my English will not be a problem, I guess. Oh, by the way, which is important about my English, I'm Russian, so you may find that by my accent. And what I usually do in that country and for other countries, I run penetration tests and different assessments, security assessment, and after that implement security services to fix those problems we found. Also, I'm an instructor, so I usually deliver training courses for my customers, custom trainings or whatever. Speak at conferences like this one as well. If you want to contact me after this session or during the session or whatever, here's my LinkedIn. There you may find what other conference I'm talking or something, or just send me a personal message. Because we're talking about Azure or Azure, how some people call that. I'm Microsoft MVP, so that's most valuable professional in this Microsoft Azure area. I'm also OSCP, OSEP, CEH, CPENT, and many other security certifications, which is not that important. I think the most important part is not how smart I am, but what I can give you in this session. And because we have lots of content to discuss, I'm not going to talk a lot about myself. So let's better talk about what I'm going to present. So in this session, you will see agenda like this. So the things like this. You may say, what the hell is that? Like, it doesn't look like a normal agenda. It's like 3 figures. Yes, that's my agenda. So in this session, I'm going to show you, and it will be based on live demos. I'm going to show you how I can compromise 3 environment, more or less exist when you work with cloud services in Azure cloud services. So first of all, I'm going to compromise hybrid Active Directory. So when you have on-prem ID, and every company has on-prem ID, and you have cloud ID, quite often those Active Directories are integrated. So how we can compromise that environment? Then I'm going to show you what if you have application deployed in virtual machines, how those virtual machines may be compromised as well. And finally, web application with SQL Server. So here we're going to talk about PaaS services, so like managed services, where we go beyond virtual machines. All right, so let's get started. I promise you it will be a lot of live demos. So slides they will just show where we are. So from here, I want to say that we are starting the first objective, or first part. First, we may say module or scenario, where I'm going to have Active Directory and Azure AD Connect. So Azure AD Connect, that's the tool, if you haven't worked with that before, that's the tool that will allow me to synchronize identities from on-premises to the cloud. So I'm going to jump to demo, I promise you. And first, let me show you AD Connect itself. Few things important about AD Connect important for my demos, and then I'm going to show you how those things may be compromised. So here on the screen, you may see AD Connect, and the part of configuration of AD Connect is creation of account that will have permissions to read from on-premises AD. So here you can see that I must add forest. That's my forest. And I click Add Directory, and here this account must be created. You may allow AD Connect create account for you, which is the most recommended option. So this first recommended, and so it will be created. This account will be created for you, or you may pre-create account and delegate all permissions manually. I'm not going to follow that path. Let me just stick on the recommended option. So create new account. So it will be created automatically by AD Connect. Let me show you this account that was created already. This account will be called MSOL underscore and something else, like different numbers, digits, and letters. So in my case, it's called 9cc and so on. I'm going to properties of this account. I'm going to check properties. and membership, group membership. It seems like it's like a regular user. So this account, even if someone owns this account, this account is it's just a simple user without any special privileges, right? Yes, by default, that's correct. But let's take a look on something else. Let's take a look. If in my AD Connect wizard, when I configure AD Connect, I enable different options, account will have more permissions. So look at this. On the right, you may find options. On the left, permissions. Very popular option and very recommended by Microsoft as well, by the way. Password hash sync. So this option allows you not just synchronize account itself, but also synchronize password hash. So users will have the same passwords on premises and in the cloud. It's very convenient. And by the way, in this case, also you will get like a disaster recovery solution because cloud will have all of the password hashes. And if you lose your on-prem connectivity, users will be able to connect to the cloud anyway. It will be able to log in because all password hashes stored there. So this is very, very recommended by Microsoft. But if you enable this password hash sync, what will happen? Account will have permission called replicate directory changes. And replicate directory changes all. Maybe you know what is that, maybe not. I will show you that anyway. So let me jump back to demo. Let me jump to demo and show you those permissions. If I go to properties of my domain and click security and click on MSRL. So here, those permissions. They are delegated automatically. All right, now, two questions. First of all, how to own account, because account was created automatically. I don't know password for this account. So how to own this account? And second question, all right, if I own this account, how privileges may be used? Let me show you both answers. I will switch to AD Connect server. I can go open SQL Server, SQL Server Management Studio. And so let me answer the question about the password for MSRL. So password will be stored in a SQL Server database because AD Connect has database behind the scenes. And if you go to program files, SQL Server, oh, not the SQL Server, not SQL Server, AD Sync data, and here you may find database MDF of the database associated with AD Connect. Now let me connect to this database using SQL Management Studio. Expand databases, AD Sync, tables. And if I look at the table called management, first let me show you the name of the table, management agent. So this table should contain the data I want. Let me say select top 1000 rows. Also, to make it more convenient, I'm going to get rid of some of the columns. So let's do it like this. And let's run again. And let's find this one. So look at this. MSRL underscore 9cc in my case. And so account is stored somewhere there. I mean, information about account. And the password, it says password is encrypted. So password exists, but it's not that straightforward. So you cannot just find, the plain text value. So password will be encrypted. And now the most interesting thing, which is quite commonly we find when I work with customer environments and run assessment. So who can decrypt this password? And the answer is local administrator. So the user who has access to AD Connect server, admin access to AD Connect server. So this user may be a local administrator on this server or AD Sync admin. So user with those permissions will be able to decrypt this password. And unfortunately, in the real world, that's a very common case because, AD Connect not the main controller. So middle level administrators quite often have access to this server. So let me show you how decryption may be done. I can do it manually, but that will take a while. Or I can use tool called AD-Connect Dump. So that's available freely on GitHub. Use this tool and just run script. All right, now I can see MSOL and crazy long password. So now I own the account. From here, let me copy this account, this password, and jump to a different workstation. Open CMD, and open CMD as a different user. So with this password and this username. Okay. All right. So now let's take a look on the first command prompt. Who I am? I am user JDO. And if I look at my permissions related to domain controller, so I'm going to try to list a C drive on domain controller. Access denied. So this user JDO, maybe this user is local admin on this specific workstation, but this user is not a domain administrator. So just a regular user with local admin permissions. Now let's see, where am I here? This user is MSOL. Let's see if I have permissions on domain controller. Access denied. No permissions. Okay. So what I can do with those permissions in that case, if I open a very well-known tool, Mimikatz, and probably you know that Mimikatz may be obfuscated to evade antiviruses. So with Mimikatz, I can run a command called LSA dump DC sync. So the idea of DC sync, we will run the replication. So we'll replicate information about any user we want if we have permissions. I do have permission. I mean, not me, but this account has permissions to replicate, right? So I can replicate information about domain administrator. In my case, it's called trainer. Let's do it. And now I have the password hash. And if I run Mimikatz on a different on a different command prompt, so I run Mimikatz here, and let's elevate and run a command called pass the hash, and copy this hash, paste here. And now I have another command prompt with domain admin permissions. So that's what may happen. That's what may happen if you allow users with middle level administrator have access to AD Connect server, have admin access to have AD Connect server. So now we compromised our Active Directory because of AD Connect. But we're not yet in the cloud, so we just here locally. Now I'm a god locally, but if I want to move on, if I want to move and test virtual machines or web application, I must have some extra permissions, right? So now I'm just a domain administrator, which is like an on-prem user. But if I want to test something in the cloud, that's not enough. So let's continue our journey and let's try to get into the cloud. To get into the cloud, we must do it somehow. If I'm a domain administrator and I can control AD Connect, so one option I can do, I can create a user locally. This user will be synchronized, and then this user will become the cloud user. But the problem is this user will be like a regular user. Maybe, of course, we can add this user to the group, and this group may have some permissions. So there are a number of ways to do that, to achieve that. But let me show you how we can play with tokens and get into the cloud using tokens. So I'm going back to demo. And so if I'm a domain administrator, I can connect to literally any workstation, right? So any workstation on the network. Most of the time, that's correct. And so let me open one command prompt on one machine. And let's say I want to list virtual machines in the cloud. And that's working. Now let's do the same on a different machine. And it should fail. Here, should fail. Yeah, it says you must run AZ login. So wait a second, why I must run AZ login here, but just easily get all information here? The reason is after you run AZ login, the token will be cached locally. So if I go to users, find my folder, here's the folder called .azure in my profile. And in this folder, by the way, that's from the previous one. In this folder, some tokens will be cached. Access token, a refresh token, and access token has expiration date, but the refresh token will be on my disk for a long time. And there's if I use that by default, it will not expire at all. So let me take all of these files. Let me zip them just to speed things up. Copy this, and let's try to paste that to different workstation. Remove this. All right, let's extract here, and let's repeat the same attack. I mean, not attack, but the same command. Fingers crossed, it should work now. Yep, that's working. That's working. So because I got a refresh token, this refresh token gave me new access token. And I bypassed MFA, I bypassed all the password prompts just because I have this token. All right, so now let me jump back to slides. And now I can connect to the cloud. And so and in the cloud, first, I want to show you how we can pen test and how we can play with virtual machines. I have two virtual machines, and Jenkins, which is, very well-known CI/CD server, and Jenkins deploy on those virtual machines. To be fair, it's not really important if it's Jenkins or something else. My goal is to show you virtual machine pen test for when we have Linux and Windows as well. So first, let me jump to portal, Azure portal, and I just want to show you. Oh, I didn't sign in. Let me quickly sign in. Wait a second. Fine now. So let me quickly show you my virtual machines on the portal. So there are virtual machines Jenkins Master and Jenkins Slave. That's my goal, to work with those machines. Jenkins Master is Windows. So Windows, where it says Windows. And Jenkins Slave is Linux. So if I want to connect the virtual machine, let's say I know the IP address. Let me copy this IP address. Open MS. Oh, not MS. It was Notepad with file name MS, MSTAC, and let's connect to this machine. Oh, it was connected, but I must know the password. So what if I don't know the password? And I don't. So now I don't know the password. So maybe there's a way somehow bypass this password prompt and get into virtual machine without password prompt. The same problem, by the way, maybe on Linux. Maybe I need to have SH key or root password to log in. I don't have all of this. So how we can try to bypass that? There's a feature called run command. So the idea of this run command that you may run any command inside of virtual, and it will run with the highest privileges. So the idea of that is like when you have virtual machines in the cloud, you don't need to log into each machine individually. If you want to manage them, you can do that right from here. You don't need to log into machine. But at the same time, what if we run some commands that give me access, like reverse shell? Let's try that. By the way, to run command, you must have permissions for that, of course. So if I go to roles, there's a number of roles, and the role that you must have is called contributor, or maybe custom role that has those permissions. So this role, but usually if we're still talking of developer or administrator, that role will be available to me. So that role will be assigned. All right, so let's try that. I'm gonna jump back to demo, and let's continue from here where we left off. So let's try to establish Linux and Windows shells. So on my attacker machine, I have netcat. Who did it? I don't know. I have netcat. And I'm listening on port 4444 and 5555. So one for Windows, another one for Linux. So let me try to run command for Linux. So that's just a reverse shell. And at the same time, I want to do the same for Windows. All right, so let's see what's going on. Oh, I have a shell on Linux. Let's see, let's click ID. And that's root, because all run commands, they work on behalf of the most privileged user. So that's root. And on Windows, it will be system. By the way, on Windows, it takes a bit more time. Oh, here we go. So who am I? And so I'm local system. So generally speaking, that was my goal, to get into virtual machines. And let's see, who am I? Host name, Jenkins master, and of course Jenkins slave as well. Host name here, Jenkins slave. All right, so because I'm here on virtual machine, so on master it must have default password in error log. Let me try to find that. So Jenkins error log, default password should be here. Yeah, it's here. So let me copy this. Paste into Notepad, and let's just go to Jenkins master, copy IP address, and go to this address, admin user, and this crazy long password should work. Yep, that's working. It doesn't really matter if it's working or not. My goal was to compromise virtual machines, get into virtual machines, and bypass password prompts. That was my goal, and I did that. So, compromised. And so from here, let's jump to the next scenario, which is going to be the last one and the longest one, where I'm going to show you how we can play with PaaS services. So now we don't have virtual machines. Now we use native Azure services like web application, SQL Server database. So here's going to be like a next challenge. So what do we have here? I have web app. Web app has backend. It's like a front end and backend. Front end on the app service, backend on SQL Server. To connect from front end to backend, we need to have username and password, right? So, but we will not store those credentials on actual web host. That's a bad practice. So what we can do, and what we did here, I'm storing credentials in Key Vault. So that's the special service to store secrets, keys, and so on. And there's another recommendation. If you have Key Vault, you store secrets and keys in a Key Vault, you should also rotate them periodically. And so for this purpose, I have credential rotation function that will periodically change credentials in a Key Vault and change them in a backend as well. So that is my scenario, and let me show you first this scenario, and we'll talk then what may be the entry point. I'm going to jump to demo again. So let's click on the Key Vault. Let's say secrets. It says I don't have permissions to list them, so doesn't work. I mean, I can't see them. So my user, that current user, doesn't have permissions to list credentials. List those secrets. Let me quickly give permission to myself just to show you that they exist. They are not empty. Let's click select and click add. Let's click save. All right, and now if I go back to secrets, I can see there is a password and username, pass and username. So let me remove those credentials real quick. And let's click save and click OK. All right, so that's Key Vault. Let's check web application. So web app here, let me open this web application. It will take some time before it will open for the first time. And also what is important, my SQL database will also need some time to resume because now it's paused. But it will start to work soon for our demo. All right, so looks like all of this look pretty fine. Where may be an entry point? So first of all, maybe web application. But from web applications, it will be hard to move to other parts. Another entry point is rotation, this function to rotate secrets. I don't want to say it's, I saw that very common, it's very common, but sometimes we saw that. One of the problem of key vaults is that by default we have what's called vault access policy, and this vault access policy is separate from other permissions. What do I mean by this? Separate from other permissions. So you configure vault access policy here, and it's not connected with other configurations like subscription permissions or resource group permission and so on. There's a new model called Azure role group, which is a bit better, but more companies use this vault access policy. So quite often, the permissions here on the function and on the key vault are not very synchronized. So they are configured differently. And you may not have permissions on the key vault level, so no permissions here on the key vault level. At the same time, you have permissions on the function level because they are configured differently. And so, like for example, you have contributor role on the subscription level, and that's why, and it will be inherited by function itself. So what we found periodically, not often, but sometimes, when companies use this function to rotate credentials, permissions not configured in the same manner. And so if we can control function, we can try to run our own code in this function and extract secrets from key vault, because function has permissions to access key vault. So let's do it. Let me switch back to demo. And let's go to AKV rotation, it's called. And this function, by the way, from Microsoft. So I did not create it myself. I just took it from the GitHub. And on this GitHub function, we have, it's called function application. And we have two functions there with different triggers. So event grid, that means you may like create custom trigger with event grid, with special service event grid, or HTTP trigger. So that means I can send HTTP request and the function will be triggered. That's what I want for my demo. Let's click here, click code and test. And here is my code. To be fair, I already pre-configured this. So initial code was this one. But I changed this code somehow. How I did that? The problem with the problem with functions, by default, FTP access is allowed. Come on, go to configuration. So when you create function, FTP state is all allowed. It's default. And companies, they don't use that. They don't use FTP. Usually they deploy using continuous deployment, DevOps process. At the same time, FTP is enabled by default, and not everyone disable FTP. So what I can do, I can connect to the function using FTP and add my own files there and make modification. So I'm gonna jump back to demo and let's do it from here. I will open FileZilla, FTP client, and now let's try to first find FTP address, FTP URL. Copy this. And let's extract credentials. So let me show you where you can find them. If you go to deployment center, where you can find them on the portal. Here's FTP credentials, and so you may show them here. So let me copy those credentials. And let's copy password as well. Copy this. And yeah, I was able to connect. Here's my function. Go here. And so what I did, I took initial function, renamed that to run.all.ps1, and placed my own code. And this code will extract data from Key Vault. So now I'm going to run PowerShell and send HTTP trigger. Send HTTP request to trigger the function. By the way, it might take some time before function gives me an answer. It might take 30 seconds. It might take a few minutes. So let me wait for a few seconds. Let me just jump to slides. So we compromise this function, and now we're trying to, using this function, we're trying to get secret from key vault. We're trying to do it. It might take some time. I know those credentials anyway, so if it will take too long, I will skip this step. But let's check. Maybe we already have an answer. Yeah. So web username is web app, and the password is password. All right. Now, so what I want to do, let me just, by the way, in parallel, open SQL Management Studio on 2 machines and jump back to slide. So now I got credentials from Key Vault, and with those credentials, I can try to connect to SQL backend. So usually backend should not have, they don't have access to, should not have access to public access to this database. But let's check that first, because that's in the cloud. Maybe it's public. We'll see. We'll see. So let's do it. So let me copy this URL. Paste here on web app and password. And it says, hey, if you want to connect, your IP address must be whitelisted because there's a firewall that does not allow you to connect. Let's check that. Let's check that on the portal. If I go to SQL Server and click Firewall, so we can see here that my IP. So there's no rules for IP addresses. So that's why I cannot connect to this database. But at the same time, we have very, very dangerous settings enabled. Allow Azure services and the resources to access this server. So what does it mean? It looks like if you enable this, your Azure services, like what you have in the cloud, will be able to connect to SQL. So it sounds pretty good, right? So you just enable this, you say yes, and all of your services that you run in the cloud will have access. Cool. But the problem is, it's not only about your services. That's about any IP address belongs to Azure. So, for example, I have SQL Server, you have virtual machine in a different part of the world, in a different subscription, but you can bypass my firewall if I enable this option, if I enable this setting. So this one's pretty dangerous. Of course, attacker must know username, must know password, but if you enable this, they can bypass firewall if they connect from any virtual machine that they deploy in Azure. They could just create a trial subscription and run virtual machine there. So pretty dangerous. I would say, let's say no. Let's try to check this rule first. If I try to connect from, this time I'm trying to connect from Azure machine. And yes, I was able to connect. So let me remove this setting. And let's say I want to deny public network access. So this time, only access, internal access from virtual network will be allowed. Let's check that. I'm going back here, disconnect, connect again, type password. No, I can't connect anymore. Now this server is really backend. All right, so this server is backend. But now there's a question: which resource may access this server? And the answer is any resource connected to virtual network, and of course my front end. Of course, in the real world, may not only be front end, but maybe some middle tiers. In my case, it's only 2 tiers, front end and back end. So in my case, front end may access this backend. So if I try to compromise somehow front end, I will be maybe I will be able to access SQL Server. So let's try that. As usual, back to demo. Let's first show you the actual front end. So it's very simple application, just a one pager. Register here and name and email. So let's give a name, Ekoparty, and let's say it will be email the ekoparty@argentina.com. So let's click submit. Yeah. And you are registered, so your record was added. Now, so what I can do if I want to try to compromise, of course I can try to run different SQL injections and try to get into, but at the same time I have web application firewall here in front, so it will be quite hard to do it. Another approach is to do the same trick we did with functions. FTP is enabled by default. Come on, wake up. So FTP is enabled. So let's repeat the same steps we did with function. So I'm going to extract credentials, FTP URL first. URL, copy this, new tab. Next, I'm going to take credentials. And the password as well. All right, now I was able to connect, and you can see that's just a one pager PHP page. So a red team conference, probably it's not surprising if I can upload something to an application, and this application is based on PHP or whatever. I can upload my own my own file, my own PHP or SPX, whatever, not in our case PHP, and I can execute commands on the server side. And so I'm gonna upload shell, web shell, and so what I can do now, I can say my shell.php. Look at this. I'm there. I'm inside of this app service. So let me jump back to slide. So now I'm locally here on web application on the actual server where this application is running. So what I can do, what I want to do, I want to connect to the SQL server. Let me check who am I first. Let's click ID. I'm data, so just a low privilege user, and I will not be able to install anything because I don't have enough permissions for that. All right, what else I can do? What if I find a tool that may be used without installation? So tool to connect to SQL without installation. And this tool exists. This tool called uSQL. You may find that in the on the web, so just on GitHub, uSQL. So it does not require installation. But it will not work through web shell. So let me just establish the full netcat shell. Let me quickly establish the shell. All right, now I have uSQL uploaded, and now I just want to connect real quick. So let's list tables. And I can see here there's a table called registration TBL. Good, let's get table content. And I can see here Ekoparty is there. So I was able to get access to SQL Server backend, to database, in a few different manners, in a few different cases when there's allowed public access, denied public access. So depends on your configuration. Some ways to get into exist. The last thing that I want to mention here is application gateway. I think it's quite obvious for you that this tool exists. The only one question, can you use them in Azure, and which one will be used in Azure, and so on. So generally speaking, different WAF, web application firewalls, may be used in Azure. And Microsoft has built-in, I mean, the service that you may manage manage WAF that you may use from Microsoft. They use open source mod security, but their rules are pretty fine. So let me just quickly show you. I run fuzzer against that with WAF Ninja, and all input that I sent did not work. So on the right hand side, you can see there is all red. Doesn't work at all. So let me jump back to slide. And so we saw 3 scenarios. Now, one slide with mitigations. I'm not going to talk a lot here because that's an offensive session, but let's just give you some advices what you can do to fix, to make your configuration better. First of all, my first attack was compromise AD Forest account. Here the idea, AD Forest, AD Connect, not Forest account, but AD Connect must be tier 0. Tier 0 means it must be accessed by the most privileged users only. Do not allow, because the logic is like AD Connect is the regular server, right? It's not the main controller, so that's why we allow server admin or help desk administrators have full access to this server. No way, don't do it. Tier 0. Always try to follow principle of least privilege. That's I can say that in any session, in any case. And there's also one tool, one service called Azure AD Connect Cloud Sync. That's the feature when we have AD Connect like in the cloud, so sync engine in the cloud. It also has a number of ways it may be compromised in a similar manner, but the biggest benefit of AD Connect Cloud Sync is the engine and all configurations as well in the cloud. So in that case, smaller number of people may have access to these configurations at least. But Cloud Sync also may be compromised, and I have a separate session about this as well. So next one, stealing cache credentials. So that's when I took token from the machine and reused that. First of all, consider to use separate machines for administration. So that's called PAW, Privileged Access Workstation, and make this machine restricted, and don't use this machine in any other cases than administration. Always try to follow principle of least privileges, of course. So in this case, even if token was stolen, the actual permissions will be lower than privileges will be lower. And also, what you can do, you may configure token policies. So token by default not expired. It will expire only 90 days of inactivity. So you may think about like not expired at all, but you may change that. So so that may be changed. Also, by the way, you may revoke token manually. That's the special PowerShell command to revoke token manually. Next one, running commands against virtual machine. So only one thing you can do here is to control permissions. Because if you don't allow contributor permissions on the virtual machine, they will not be they will not have permissions to run command. Shell upload, function modification, disable FTP. You don't need FTP, right? You don't use that. Disable this. Next one, with SQL Server. First of all, make it private. Why do you need to allow public access to SQL Server? Allow Azure services to have a public access. That's not the best practice, to be fair. So try to disable. Yeah, this option is quite convenient, but not the most secure. So much better is to use private link service, which make the connectivity private. And I mean, allowed only through virtual network. Of course, it may be compromised as well, but it's much better than make it public. And finally, web attacks, WAF, also available to you. Of course, they cost additional money. By the way, if you already have WAF that you like Barracuda, you may use that in Azure as well. Not a problem at all. You don't have to use the WAF from Microsoft. All right, so here I can finish my session and say that in this session, I show you 3 different scenarios. So first of all, hybrid AD, then virtual machines and PaaS. They somehow interconnected, not fully. So they have so second 2 scenarios, they have dependency on the first scenario. So because in the beginning, I have some level of access to the cloud, and then after this, I was able to do other things. But if you found something that configured in your way in a similar manner, in your environment in a similar manner, maybe it's time to change that. Would be very nice. Of course, choice is yours, but that's what I found in different companies and combined together. So that's all of this from reality. It's not. So really companies configure the environment like this. Maybe not all of those configurations, but some of them I constantly see in different environments. If you are a pen tester or red teamer, you may find those configurations or misconfigurations and check if your customer, your company has them, and try to use them as well. So thank you very much for your participation here. Any questions, I'll always appreciate. If you want to chat with me after this session, go ahead and find me. You know how to do it via social network. So thank you very much, and bye-bye. Have a good conference as well.